Now you're placing a lot of blame on Pittman, maybe all of it. What is the hierarchy? People are asking, is it not Nancy Pelosi who's in charge of the
Yeah.
Capitol Police?
This is the thing. January 6th, Pelosi can't create a January 6th. The only person that could create a January 6th is Pittman. She's the only person that could do it. Pelosi would need permission from Pittman to get it done. So, and this is the reason why people say, well, that doesn't make any sense because Nancy Pelosi is more powerful than Pittman. Yes, she is. But also now, Viva, you have a place where you live at, right? House or apartment, right?
Yeah. Well, a house.
Okay. You have a refrigerator in your house, right?
Yes.
Okay. If
Two.
Nancy Pelosi, okay, let's say for argument's sake, Nancy Pelosi came to your house let's use the current speaker because Nancy Pelosi is not the speaker anymore. So let's say McCarthy came over to your house right now, knocked on your door, say, hey, can I come in? Do you have a choice? Do you have to let McCarthy in your house?
I do not have to, and I probably would not.
now, let's say he walked in, he says, listen, you have beers in your refrigerator? And you say, yeah, I'm going to go have me a beer. Just because he's more powerful than you, he's more powerful in his arena. The intelligence department was Pittman's arena. She was the most powerful person. So the only way that if Nancy Pelosi could have insinuated to her, and I'm not saying she did, but it doesn't matter. It's up to Yogananda Pittman if she wants to sit on the intelligence or not. Pelosi can't order her to sit on intelligence. That's up to Pittman.
But who has the authority to call in the National Guard?
Now, Son can request the National Guard, but he has to get permission from both Sergeant at Arms. He needs permission from the House Sergeant at Arms, who was Paul Irving, and he needs permission from the Senate Sergeant at Arms, who was Michael Stinger. So he went to them to try to get the National Guard support.
Prior to January 6th, not when the shit's hitting the fan. Okay.
No. He did it. He got it doing when everything hit the fan. But he tried to do this, and like he should have done prior to January 6th, even though he didn't have all the intelligence, he tried to do it anyway, just in case. But the Sergeant at Arms is up to the Sergeant at Arms if they are going to allow him to request it. So now they have to give him permission to request it. Then he can request it from the National Guard. But it's going to have to get permission from the House Sergeant at Arms, who was Paul Irving, and the Senate Sergeant at Arms, who was Michael Stinger. It has to come from them.
Okay, so in theory, Pittman can wash her hands and say, "Well, I couldn't even control the National Guard. That didn't come through, and I did the best with what I had, which was half staff because of COVID."
She can't say that because she has no out. Because she knew that Son was trying to get national support. She had the information that would have got it to him, and she sat on it. She can't say that because if you go, once we get off this line tomorrow morning, take a read 21 TD 159 and just think about it. Would it have, at the very least, if you were a high-ranking commander, been promoted multiple times, super smart, because you got to get to that point, you wouldn't think that this document would even elicit a conversation?
I wouldn't have needed the document because it was obvious there was going to be angry protests. Yes. It was obvious. And the media knew, the FBI knew, everybody knew. And this is, look, in 2022, I made the prediction that the conspiracy theory that's going to be confirmed in 2023 is going to be this January 6th was an inside job. And this is the way it was an inside job, facilitated so that it could be exploited.
No question. And one thing too, Viva, too, before you jump into the next one.
When people say September 11th was an inside job, they suggest that the government was involved in sort of like the Whitner plot situation where you have FBI agents that find some terrorists and lead them in a direction towards planning the attack, and then they let it happen. Core fundamental concept behind that being an inside job is not that the government let it happen, but that if not for the government, there wouldn't have been a September 11th. So the idea being that the entire plot came from the government, was orchestrated by the directly or indirectly, And then, since it's their plan, obviously they're not going to block their plans, so then they let it happen. So this guy, who I'm sure is a good faith actor, who is honest and has some kind of integrity, maybe a conservative, but that's his ideology. That doesn't say whether he has character or not. So I'm sure he has some integrity, right? And that being the case, this is a good faith attempt on his behalf to suggest that this was an inside job like those that suggest September 11th was. However, he doesn't make a case that the government was directly involved in the planning of this event. He's only focusing on them letting it happen, like the "they let them in" narrative. So in other words, we have a bunch of bank robbers who come up with a plan to rob a bank themselves. It's their plan. And then we have the bank security that knows of the plan and then just lets it happen. And then, rather than them letting it happen be secondary to what really happened, which is that the bank was robbed, this guy wants to make the "they let it happen" be the story. That's what happened, right? Never mind the bank robbers, right? It was their plan. They went in there, they killed people, they stole his money. Don't worry about that. What you need to worry about is that the bank let it happen, right? I mean, I would think the way to look at it as someone who has integrity would be, first, the bank robbery, which you put on the bank robbers. Bad. You shouldn't rob a bank. You shouldn't have killed whoever you killed in the bank robbery, right? That's the focus. And then secondly, by the way, you guys at security for the bank, you could have stopped this, perhaps. Not a guarantee, but, you knew this was happening. You sat there and you let it happen. But to make that "they let it happen" be the primary thing that you focus on, I think conflicts with the idea that this guy's being good faith. Because that would be a bad faith thing to do. If the reality of the people who planned this thing, if the reality is that these are people who would enjoy your content and share your ideology, that's an inconvenient reality. So the bad faith thing is you want to protect from that uncomfortable truth. You don't want to talk about people who share your ideology and people who would, be your fans. You don't want to talk about them plotting such a horrible event as January 6th. So what you want to do is you want to deflect and talk about something else that is more convenient. And what could be more convenient than talking about that they let it happen and that the whole thing was a setup, which sort of whitewashes the people who would like you, takes the focus away from them. Right? Now we're going to focus on the police letting it happen, and it's a government thing, and it's a deep state thing, and that allows you to spend a lot of the time focusing on something that's more comfortable. Demonizing, the government and that they let it happen, like that can work. But demonizing people who share your ideology and people who love your content, not so much. So that would explain why, after so many years, we have an incident that involves so many police officers. Many, or a few, committed suicide after the fact. Many of them got seriously injured during the event. Multiple surgeries, physical therapy, mental issues as a result, depression, all that kind of stuff. So many years have gone by, and we haven't seen any officers being allowed to speak on right-wing channels. Quite a few officers that have been out there willing to speak and share what happened, and right-wing media has basically blacklisted them. Won't talk to them. You don't see them on. And the very first officer I see on a right-wing channel is an officer being used to push the idea that the whole thing was a setup. Like, that's the title of the video. It's a setup. Purpose of this interview, most of the focus was on it being a setup, and they allowed it to happen. But interestingly enough, even with that being said, and this is at the end of the video, towards the end of the video, but a popular narrative by the same group of people which is blaming it on Nancy Pelosi, who is a corrupt fool who I can't believe is running for office again, that just got destroyed. This guy who's there, oh, it's a setup, right? He just said, it ain't Nancy Pelosi. Are there going to be a bunch of videos from right-wing channels talking about how it's not Nancy Pelosi and focusing on this Pittman angle? Instead, all the ones who were saying, oh, Pelosi could have this, and it's Pelosi. Are they now going to go after Pittman and say, oh, it's just Pittman's fault, Pittman? I guess it depends. Is Pittman a Democrat? Right? Right. The fact that you can be very wealthy by pandering to, telling them what they want to hear, protecting them from uncomfortable truths, is very toxic to this country, because it's incentivizing the creation of artificial bubbles or realities. And when you have millions and millions of Americans living in alternate realities and basing their decisions on how they vote and how they see this country, basing it on an illusion, it has some very real world consequences and will continue to until the American people wise up, wake up, get woke, and unplug from partisan media, whether it's left-wing or right-wing. To go back to a time when we had a shared reality, right? A reality based on reality, not based on profit motives. And then have that environment be better than it was, because there certainly were problems as well back then. Sometimes that shared reality was used against us. We should all be making decisions and making our opinions and forming our ideologies based on the same facts. The facts, not based on constructed narratives, constructed realities by online profiteers who will say and do anything for views. This is the Baby Channel, the Baby. Hello to the 20 people that will actually watch this video.